August 18th, 1944, near Argenton, France. The sun bleeds through a pale morning haze over the shattered fields of Normandy. Smoke drifts across hedgerows cut open by days of artillery fire. The roar of engines, not German, but the deep, rhythmic thunder of American Shermans echoes from the west. Oberst Fritz Bayerlein crouches beside a burned half-track, binoculars raised. His uniform, once immaculate with Panzer piping, is coated in chalky dust. The sound of his heartbeat almost drowns out the distant rumble of approaching armor. "They're coming from every direction," murmurs his adjutant, Lieutenant Schneider, sweat streaking through the grime on his face. "We have orders to break east, Herr Oberst, if we stay." "If we stay, we die." Bayerlein cuts him off, his voice clipped, composed, the tone of a man who's seen the desert at Al Alamein and the chaos of Kasserine. Yet even he cannot mask the disbelief in his eyes. The German front has dissolved into fragments, Patton spearheads, Third Army armor rolling on endless convoys of trucks are closing the Falaise pocket. For days, Bayerlein has heard rumors, American columns fed by an invisible river of supply, stretching all the way to Normandy's beaches. Fuel, ammunition, rations, everything flowing like water. By noon, his Kampfgruppe is down to 2 Panthers, a few trucks, and a handful of exhausted men. Fuel gauges rest on empty. They creep along narrow lanes through wheat stubble, engines coughing, until a sharp metallic ping pierces the air, a bullet ricochets off a fender. Machine gun fire erupts from the hedgerows. U.S. infantry of the 90th Division has cut them off. "Smoke grenade, schnell!" The order goes out, but the answer comes in English. "Hands up, drop your weapons." The air fills with shouting, the bark of Garans and the clatter of Thompsons. One Panther lurches, its track thrown. The other, out of fuel, sits like a monument to futility. Bayerlein raises his pistol, hesitates, then lowers it. Around him men throw down helmets and stretch their hands skyward. Moments later, under armed escort, he's marched toward a collection of tents at a crossroads marked by a hand-painted sign, "Paul Dump 17, 3rd Army Supply." The irony stings. Bayerlein has been fighting to find fuel for days. Now he's walking straight into a mountain of it. Rows of 55-gallon drums glint in the sunlight, tens of thousands of gallons stacked beside tankers and jeeps. The smell of gasoline hangs thick in the heat. American soldiers lounge nearby, laughing, drinking coffee, repairing a truck axle as if the war itself were an inconvenience. A sergeant eyes him curiously. "You the Kraut colonel they've been talking about?" "Oberst Fritz Bayerlein," he replies stiffly. The sergeant grins, waving at the rows of drums. "Pretty sight, ain't it? That's just one dump, buddy. We got 10 more like it between here and Cherbourg." Bayerlein says nothing, but inside disbelief churns. 10 more? He looks again at the endless convoys rolling past, Red Ball Express trucks bearing red circular insignias, their engines humming without pause. Drivers, many African-American, work in rotating shifts, hauling fuel and ammunition day and night. It's an army behind the army, something Germany never managed to create. He watches as a jeep stops nearby, an officer stepping out. General George S. Patton himself, stars gleaming on his helmet. Patton strides toward the supply line, barking praise and orders with equal ferocity. The entire scene unfolds with mechanical precision, refueling tanks, dispatchers coordinating routes, clerks tallying barrels. War as industry, not desperation. "Fuel," Bayerlein whispers under his breath. "It's always fuel." In North Africa, he had learned that a division without gasoline was a corpse. Here, in France, the Americans had built a resurrection machine, one that never slept. The colonel is escorted to a makeshift field cage, a line of other German officers already seated within the wire. He lowers himself onto a crate. Beyond the fence, the rhythmic growl of trucks fills the night. It sounds like the ocean. A younger officer beside him, wounded, his sleeve bandaged, mutters in disbelief. How can they feed so many machines? The Bayerline's gaze stays fixed on the horizon, where headlights stream in twin lines over the hills. Because they prepared for this war as if it were a factory, and we prepared as soldiers. In the distance, an American corporal calls out road instructions through a megaphone. A convoy of Studebakers and GMCs rumbles past, canvas flapping in the wind. On each door, painted in bold white, Red Ball Express. The night deepens. The colonel leans against the wire, exhaustion settling into his bones. He remembers Rommel's words in Africa. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. For the first time, he understands what that really means. The war is no longer about courage or cunning. It's about engines that never stop turning, rivers of fuel that never run dry. And as he watches the headlights fade into the darkness, Oberst Fritz Bayerlein realizes something chilling. Germany hasn't just lost a battle. It has lost the means to move. The hum of engines fades into the distance, replaced by the soft hiss of wind through the hedgerows, and the uneasy silence of realization. August 19th, 1944. Allied Supply Depot near Argentan, France. The morning breaks pale and metallic, fog clinging to the low fields. Dew glistens on the barbed wire surrounding the prisoner pen where Oberst Fritz Bayerlein and a dozen captured officers huddle in silence. From beyond the fence, the sounds of machinery rise again, engines revving, cranes clanking, the steady rhythm of commerce in motion. The Red Ball Express is awake. Convoyed trucks, each marked with a bold red circle, thunder along the nearby road in endless succession. Dodge and GMC 2.5-ton trucks laden with jerry cans, crates, and fuel drums stacked to the sky. Drivers shout instructions over the roar, maps pinned to dashboards, cigarettes dangling from lips as they pass military police, waving signal paddles at intersections. Bayerlein watches, arms crossed, exhaustion deep in his eyes. There is something both alien and mesmerizing about the way these Americans wage war. It is not elegance or finesse. It is brute organization, overwhelming, mechanical, relentless. Herr Oberst, whispers Lieutenant Schneider, who sits beside him, head bandaged. They say these convoys never stop, day and night, from Cherbourg to Chartres. How is it possible? Bayerlein's reply comes slowly, eyes following a column of trucks kicking dust over the hedgerows. It is possible because they can't afford to burn fuel just to move fuel. That is power. He recalls his days under Rommel, the Africa Corps scraping for every liter of gasoline, scavenging captured drums from the British, calculating routes by terrain and consumption. Logistics was always the invisible hand throttling or freeing an army. But here it's a flood, not a trickle. A nearby guard, a young corporal from Alabama, leans on his M1 carbine and notices the German colonel watching the road. "You boys look like you seen a ghost," he says with a grin. "Not the ghost, sir. Just a miracle." He laughs. "Ain't no miracle, sir. Just trucks and men, and more trucks after that." He's right. Across the depot, American mechanics refuel vehicles from tanker lines stretching hundreds of yards. Canvas tents hum with generators powering radios and field kitchens. Every motion has rhythm, calculated efficiency wrapped in casual confidence. Bearline closes his eyes for a moment, inhaling the oily scent of gasoline. He's transported backwards to May 1940, when his Panzers roared through France like a steel tide. Back then, it was Germany that moved faster than anyone believed possible. Blitzkrieg, lightning war. But lightning needs fuel, and fuel was the one thing Germany never mastered to sustain. Do you know what the Americans have done, Schneider? They have turned our Blitzkrieg into an industry. By afternoon, the prisoners are marched toward a transport point for interrogation. American MPs lead them past rows of parked trucks and mobile fuel bowsers, each emblazoned with unit codes and chalkboard route logs. Bearline studies every marking, mentally mapping the flow of Allied logistics. Cherbourg Port, Saint-Lô, Le Mans, Chartres, and onward to Patton's Third Army spearheads racing toward the Seine. That name, Patton, again. The Americans speak of him like a storm, unstoppable and hungry. A truck pulls up, and Bearline and the other prisoners are loaded into its back. Through the slats, he glimpses the convoy route, a line of moving steel cutting across the countryside, flanked by repair crews, MPs, and fueling stations. Every few miles, he sees new dumps, mountains of gasoline, ammunition, food, everything his own division had begged for before collapsing. He imagines the staff meetings back in Germany, the endless memos from Berlin insisting that fuel reserves will suffice for local operations, lies dressed as optimism. As the convoy rolls onward, Bearline speaks quietly to himself. The Americans fight with their factories. We fight with our memories. A truck halts briefly at a crossroads. A group of Red Ball drivers unloads boxes of rations, sea kits, Spam, coffee, cigarettes, tossing them like bags of sand. Many are African-American soldiers wearing grease-stained overalls, their hands quick, movements practiced. One of them glances at the German prisoners through the slats, just a flicker of eyes meeting eyes, then goes back to work, indifferent. It dawns on Bearline, these men his nation once deemed inferior, are the ones feeding an empire on wheels. It is a quiet humiliation, but also a moment of revelation. Later that night, Bearline lies awake on his cot, the canvas creaking beneath him. The glow of lanterns outside cast moving shadows across the tent wall. Silhouettes of men fueling vehicles, loading crates, laughing. He realizes that this, not the battlefield, not the tanks or tactics, is where the true war was won. Logistics, supply, motion. He thinks of Rommel's maxim, now carved into his memory. The battle is fought and decided by the quartermasters before it begins. A thin smile forms on his face, not from amusement, but from understanding. In the end, it wasn't that the Americans were better soldiers. It was that they had mastered the art of never stopping. August 21st, 1944. Allied prisoner processing camp near Le Mans, France. Rain patters lightly on the canvas roof of the detention tent. The early morning air is damp, filled with the scent of wet burlap, oil, and distant exhaust fumes. Beyond the barbed wire perimeter, convoys rumble eastward toward the front, their engines fading into the mist like waves crashing against an unseen shore. Oberst Fritz Bearline sits on a wooden crate, writing notes in a small field journal salvaged from his uniform pocket, the same leather-bound notebook he carried through Africa and Italy. His handwriting is precise, mechanical, the product of a mind trained in order, even amid collapse. August 21. The Americans move without pause. Their machines feed on their own momentum. It is not war as I understood it. It is production extended to the battlefield. A guard approaches, motioning him to stand. Bayerlein is escorted to a larger tent, serving as an interrogation hut. Inside, Allied intelligence officers lean over maps spread across a table cluttered with coffee mugs and coded signal reports. The smell of tobacco smoke hangs thick in the air. Seated among them is Colonel Paul W. Thompson, G4 logistics officer attached to Patton's Third Army. His uniform is crisp, his eyes alert, the look of a man who hasn't slept but still commands attention through energy alone. "Good morning, Colonel. I've been hoping for this conversation." "I imagine you have questions." "A few, but mostly I'm curious. You fought Rommel's kind of war. Maneuver, surprise, tempo. What do you think of ours?" "It is no longer a soldier's war, Colonel. It is an engineer's." Thompson studies him, tapping a pencil on the map. "That's not wrong. We built this whole campaign around movement, bridges, fuel, trucks. No glamour, just grease and gasoline. You fight with mathematics. And spreadsheets, if we had 'em." They both chuckle faintly. It's the rare moment of levity between enemies who share a professional respect. But beneath Bayerlein's composure, there's a quiet turmoil. He recalls the final days of Panzers, his division, once the pride of Germany, crushed under the weight of Allied air power and logistics. Bombed convoys, broken supply lines, tanks abandoned for lack of fuel. He had begged Berlin for more gasoline, more trucks, more tires. Each request met with silence, or worse, slogans about willpower and faith in victory. Here, in contrast, the Americans treat logistics like religion. Every drum, every tire, every spark plug cataloged and moved with purpose. Thompson pours 2 cups of coffee, sliding one across the table. "We call it the Red Ball Express. Started a week ago. Thousands of trucks, all on priority roads, feeding Patton's tanks as they break through. 24 hours a day. When one truck breaks, another takes its place. Simple idea, but it works." "You could not have done this in 1940. "No, but we learned from watching you. Blitzkrieg taught us speed. We just added gasoline." The line lands with quiet weight. Bayerlein stares at the map, thick blue arrows stretching eastward toward the Seine, toward the borders of Germany itself. He sets down the cup and meets Thompson's gaze. "When you saw your fuel depot, I thought it was victory itself. 10 more like it, the sergeant said." "He was right. We've got depots stacked all the way to Normandy, and tankers coming in every day from the beaches. The Red Ball keeps it all moving." "And when it stops?" "Then the war stops. But it won't. Not yet." Outside, the faint honk of a convoy horn breaks the silence. Another wave of trucks rumbles past, their engines harmonizing in a low mechanical chorus. Bayerlein glances toward the tent flap, unable to resist stepping closer. He parts the canvas and watches. The convoy line stretches beyond sight, olive-drab vehicles rolling under the drizzle, mud splashing up their fenders. The sight is hypnotic. He whispers, almost to himself, "They move as if they will never run out." Behind him, Thompson speaks softly. "That's the point. We can't let them run out." For a moment, Bayerlein sees not an enemy, but a mirror, another officer bound to duty to an idea. But where his war was built on scarcity and improvisation, theirs is built on abundance and system. Later that day, as Bayerlein is escorted back to the prisoner compound, the rain eases.
The road outside the camp glistens with puddles reflecting the convoy lights. A jeep passes, splashing mud over the wire. Its driver waves casually at the guards, a cigarette glowing in his mouth. Bayerlein turns to Schneider, who limps beside him. "Do you remember in Africa when Rommel said fuel is the bloodline of war?" "Yes, Herr Oberst. We thought it was poetry. The Americans made it doctrine." That night, the colonel writes again in his journal. His entries are terse, analytical, but each line bleeds with realization. "Victory now depends not on courage, but on coordination. Not on aces or heroes, but on dispatchers, mechanics, and drivers. The Red Ball Express, it is not just supply, it is strategy made physical." He closes the notebook and sets it beside him. Outside, the distant thunder of trucks merges with the faint drone of aircraft, transports, likely, ferrying supplies further east. The sky is clear now, moonlight glinting off the puddles. For the first time, Bayerlein feels the full weight of inevitability pressing down. Germany's factories lie in ruins, its oil fields are dwindling, its armies are fighting on fumes. And here, in this muddy French field, the realization is absolute. The Americans have turned logistics into a weapon, one that never jams, never sleeps, and never hesitates. As he lies back on the cot, the engines roll by again, steady and endless. "They will reach the Rhine before we can even rebuild a bridge," he mutters. Schneider glances over. "Then what happens, Herr Oberst?" Bayerlein exhales slowly. "Then the war truly ends, not with a battle, but with an empty fuel tank." The wind carries the hum of trucks into the night, a song of motion and inevitability. The sound of an army powered by something more enduring than courage.
September 2nd, 1944, near Reims, France. The early morning air is heavy with the smell of diesel and rain-soaked soil. A blanket of fog drapes across the countryside, muffling the sound of the convoys that now seem to fill every road, every horizon. From his barbed wire enclosure at the temporary POW camp, Oberst Fritz Bayerlein watches the steady pulse of the American war machine moving east, the endless flow of trucks, tanks, and gasoline that has become the heartbeat of the Allied advance. It is no longer the thunder of a single battle. It is an industrial hum that never stops. Inside the compound, the German officers have grown quieter with each passing day. News trickles in from newly captured soldiers. Paris has fallen. The Seine has been crossed. Patton spearheads are already racing toward the Meuse. Bayerlein listens in silence as one of his fellow officers, a young major from the 2nd Panzer Division, recounts the story of an entire column running out of fuel near Montmirail, abandoned where it stood. Tanks left like tombs on the roadside, their crews surrendering without a fight. "They call it gasoline warfare," the major mutters bitterly. "You don't win with courage anymore. You win with octane." Bayerlein nods slowly, and the Americans have oceans of it. He remembers Rommel's Africa, the long, desperate chases across desert. Every liter of fuel counted like blood. He remembers the Rommel convoys, those few ships daring to cross the Mediterranean under British air attacks, each one sunk, each loss a nail in the coffin of the Afrika Korps. And now, here in France, the tables have turned completely. The Americans are the desert foxes now, and Germany the stranded prey. That afternoon, a commotion ripples through the camp. An American staff car, mud-splattered but immaculate in its purposeful movement, rolls through the gates. Inside sits a lean officer in a leather jacket, his helmet painted with 3 stars. Even before anyone speaks his name, Byerline knows who it is. General George S. Patton. Patton steps out, his polished boots sinking slightly into the wet earth. The man moves like a conductor stepping onto his stage. His revolvers glint in the weak sunlight. Two aides follow, taking note, their pace struggling to keep up. He strides toward the wire, glancing briefly at the prisoners inside, a mix of field-gray uniforms and weary eyes. His gaze lingers on Byerline. Recognition flickers. "Byerline, isn't it? Panzer? "Yes, General." "I saw your work in Africa. Hell of a fight. Shame about how it ended." "The same could be said of many wars, General." "Maybe, but not this one." His eyes drift toward the distant road where trucks continue to roll, headlights cutting through the mist like moving stars. He speaks almost proudly, as if narrating a sermon. "You know, my men drive 1,500 trucks a day on the Red Ball routes. Gas, ammo, food, anything we need. The trick isn't courage, it's motion. Keep moving, and you don't have to fight half the battles." Byerline studies him carefully. The swagger, the confidence, the raw certainty. This man fights wars like a machine fights friction by overpowering it. "You have achieved what our generals never could, to make the battlefield serve the supply line." "Damn right. Napoleon said an army marches on its stomach. I say it marches on gasoline." He taps his riding crop against his leg, looking out toward the horizon. "You Germans taught us plenty. We just learned faster." Then, as quickly as he appeared, Patton turns, gives a short nod, and strides back toward his car. Within seconds, the engine roars, and he's gone. Another moving part in the great machinery of war. Byerline watches the dust settle. For a long moment he says nothing. Then, quietly, almost reverently, he is right. They learned faster. That evening, as the sun dips below the tree line, the POW camp falls into stillness. Only the distant growl of engines breaks the quiet. Convoys still rolling through the night, their headlights flickering like fireflies on the far road. Byerline sits with his adjutant, Lieutenant Schneider, beside a dim lantern. Between them lies a folded scrap of paper, a hand-drawn sketch of France, marked with arrows, fuel routes, and depot numbers. He's been reconstructing what he's seen, piece by piece, out of habit, a soldier still thinking like a staff officer. "See this line here," he says, tracing his finger eastward from Normandy. "Cherbourg to Chartres. Every 30 kilometers, a depot. From there, forward refuel points. They can leapfrog fuel faster than we can retreat." Schneider stares, bewildered. But how can they sustain it? Byerline gives a faint, tired smile. Because they never stop. The trucks run, the drivers change. A machine that never sleeps. He pauses, then adds, "When the Allies took Normandy, they didn't just take land. They took distance, and they filled it with movement." The words linger between them, carried by the rhythm of engines beyond the wire. September 10th, 1944. The Allies have crossed the Moselle. Patton's tanks are fighting near Nancy. Byerline learns of it through overheard guard chatter. The speed of it defies belief. In his mind's eye, he can still see the columns, Red Ball Express trucks roaring through the night, headlights blacked out except for thin slits, drivers guided by instinct and the thrum of diesel. Men running on coffee and determination, crossing France in a day what once took armies a week. It is the pure embodiment of modern war, a choreography of steel and fuel, of motion and maintenance. That night, Byerline writes his final entry in the Little Field Journal. "Our downfall is not in defeat of arms, but in systems.
The Americans have made war mechanical. The rest of us still wage it by hand. He closes the book and places it carefully inside his tunic. Outside, rain begins again, gentle and unending, like the murmur of the engines that will carry the war all the way to Germany. The camera lingers on Bayerlein's face, eyes weary but clear. Behind him, trucks roll past in the darkness, their headlights streaking across the mud like veins of light feeding a living giant. The Red Ball Express continues east, and with every mile, the old world dies a little more.